It was the cleanest jail I was ever in Alexandria, Virginia.
Well, that certainly is impressive, Harry. Good for you.
Peace activist Father Harry Burry and Nancy Nelson, now on Democratic Visions.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Democratic Visions. I'm so happy to be here once again. It's been a while, but it's always a privilege to spend a little bit of time with you and the wonderful guy who puts all this together, Jeff Strait. And today is really a special day, personally for me, but I think it's going to be very special for you. We are going to spend a little bit of time with a gentleman I've known virtually my entire life. His name is Father Harold J. Burry. He is a man who has walked the earth in love and peace and decency and compassion and absolute dedication to making the world a better place every single day of his life, right up to and through his 89th birthday that was in January of 2019. Harry has written 2 books, the most recent, Maverick Priest, A Story of Life on the Edge. And most of all, Harry, as you have written this book, you want to communicate to us not just your personal life experiences, but how we might see a light to making a difference and being an activist as you have. Am I right?
Yes, I'm really concerned that in order to have peace in the world, we all need to work together to make it happen. No one Lone Ranger can do the job.
And in the next half hour, that's the word we're going to hear most, peace. You came to the peace movement, if that's a good way of putting it, well into your adulthood. You had been a priest, and I met you when I was much, much younger than you, Harry. Much, much, much younger than you. At St. Helena's Parish. And you transferred over to the Newman Center and ran that wonderful place over there for the students. And it was students who opened your eyes to what the peace movement was all about. How did that story begin for you?
Well, it was an incredible change because when I was at St. Helena's, I asked the Archbishop if I could become a chaplain in the armed forces.
I remember.
And then I go to Newman Center at the University of Minnesota, and the Vietnam War was at its height, and students were coming to me and saying, you know, since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I was taught not to kill anybody. Well, the Bible and Jesus says very clearly, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. And so I just can't go into the armed forces and train to kill people and do it. And so I'm a conscientious objector, and in order for me to be able to persuade the government, I need a priest to come with me and speak for me or write a letter for me so that I can be a conscientious objector. And so that's what I began to do. And the more that I did that, the more I studied about what the war was about, and the more I came to conclude that it was not only a mistake, but it was immoral.
And that began the journey. A journey of dedication, a journey of risk-taking, a journey of being, at the very least, disciplined and sometimes ostracized by your own church, a journey of being arrested and requiring bail more than once. I remember a phone call shortly after Billy and I were married, or maybe it was before, and we got a phone call, my husband Bill Carlson, and you said, I was just in this peace demonstration that I was leading with students from the university, and I've been arrested. Can you guys help me get out? And we called our friend, attorney Ron Meshbesher, and Ronnie came down and got you out, I think, didn't he?
Oh, he was wonderful. He came right down, stopped whatever he was doing, and came into the courtroom, and he argued in my behalf, and the judge wasn't going to listen, and so he just demanded $600 bail.
This is a great story. Finish it. Yes.
Yes, and of course I didn't have $600, and this little Jewish lady comes up and pays the $600, and I find out afterwards that she was a correspondent with the monk Thomas Merton. They were letter writers, and once I was found not guilty, about 6 months later, And then I paid her back, of course.
You know, there are so many stories early on that are quite fascinating. One, and of course you recount them all for us in Maverick Priest, is about Mother Teresa. Of course, the world came to know and revere her for the person she was and the work that she did. You encountered her very early on, before hardly anybody knew about her, and somebody pulled the plug on her right here in the Twin Cities.
We got to know Mother Teresa with this study group that I was working with, 5 doctors and their wives. And one of the ladies, Patty Kump, wrote to Mother Teresa because she saw an article about her in a magazine and asked if we could do something for her. And she wrote back and said, pray for our sisters, and especially pray for the people we're working with. But we wanted to do more than that, so we gathered out some clothes and sent them. And Mother was very diplomatic and sweet and caring, and she said, thank you very much, but we could have bought more clothes here in India with the postage that it cost you to send the clothes. And diplomatically, she was also saying to us that those clothes are not the kind of thing that even poor people would put on. I mean, the people there in India couldn't see any use of a tie, for example. We didn't know any better. But that began the relationship, and so every time she came to the United States, to Catholic Relief Services in New York, she would then also come out to Minneapolis. So we got to know her very well. She stayed at the Kump's house, and then I had the opportunity to go to Calcutta, Kolkata, I guess it's called today, and visit her place there. And the first place they took us to, or she took us to, was the House of the Dying. And Mother Teresa was going around to each, as soon as we came in, she would go to each of the persons laying there on a mat on the floor, and she would put a white cloth over them, wet cloth, and then she would talk to them in their ear, of course, their language. And then we followed suit, and myself and my 2 companions. And of course, I couldn't speak the language, but I would bless the person. And then Mother Teresa, one of the persons said she couldn't die until she got to see her son. And so Mother Teresa motioned to my friend Jeffrey to come over, and says, "You be your son."
Oh, Harry.
And
I haven't heard this story.
Yeah, and Jeffrey, there was the son, and then the person was able to die in peace.
I recall when you told me about that the first time, that you indicated the whole scene was overwhelming.
As I entered the House of the Dying, the smell was so bad because of the heat. I suppose partly medicine, partly the perspiration of the bodies, because the room was just filled. There must have been 60 people on mats on the floor. And the smell almost knocked me over. Of course, Mother Teresa went in, and I could not go in. So I followed her. But after maybe 5-10 minutes, I didn't notice it anymore.
There are so many stories. I want us to talk about as many as possible, but because we spoke of Mother Teresa, let's fast forward to you were attending the peace talks in Paris, trying to end the war in Vietnam. And you and another fellow priest went to Rome to ask the Holy Father, to ask the Pope, if he would declare his support of peace and end to war in Vietnam. He did not see you. He would not see you. And being Harry Burry, you said, "Well, I'm here anyway." And you stepped onto the front steps of St. Peter's Cathedral and said Mass. At which point, the priest from Minnesota was arrested by the Swiss Army Guard for the Vatican because you were saying Mass without a permit. Of all crazy things. They arrested you, took you in, didn't know what to do with you, and said, "Go and never come back again." And then we fast forward to pick it up here. What year, when Mother Teresa is about to have her beatification to sainthood.
Mother Teresa was beatified in 2004, and I got a letter.
She had died, and beatification, I'm sorry to interrupt, for those who might not be familiar with the Catholic structure, it is suggested that this person may qualify to achieve sainthood when they do more research on their life and their life's work. And the beatification is a huge ceremony that says, okay, this is the start of the process to raise her to sainthood. It's a big deal.
Yes, and there was at least 1 million people there, from the steps of the Basilica of St. Peter all the way to the river. Anyway, I got this email asking if I'd be willing to come and give out communion at the Mass, and they needed about 300 priests to do that, to give communion to 1 million people. And it was in the summer, so I was free, didn't have any classes, so I said, yes, I'd love to come. So when I got there, they told me to come to the convent, Mother Teresa's convent. When I went there, they sent me down to, I think it was Sister Cecilia's office. And when I told her who I was, she reached down and she pulled up an envelope and she held it above her head and she said, cardinals and bishops wanted one of these and you get it. And it was an invitation to concelebrate the Mass with Pope John Paul. And the Mass was set out on the steps of St. Peter's. And in 1971, as you said, when we were not able to see a Holy Father, and I said that protest Mass, I was arrested on those very same steps saying Mass there, and they told me, leave Rome and never come back. And here, Mother Teresa's cosmic joke, I'm back in Rome saying Mass with the Holy Father.
Billy and I made that trip back with you along with a few other dear friends, and it was extraordinary. And I felt how astonishing this moment was. I can't even imagine what it was for you up there. The sisters saw to it we had seats in front so we could look at you next to the Pope saying Mass. It was something, wasn't it?
Yes.
You know, you just said I had the summer off from teaching. We forgot all the in-between stuff. You were at Newman Center. Then you went on to Case Western to get a degree in...
I got a PhD in organizational behavior because I wanted to learn how to make large-scale change. I'd been sort of knocking my head against the wall trying to stop the war, and I was not making any progress. So I thought maybe if I could learn about how organizations work, that I could find a way to make large-scale change. And that's why I went to the university.
And you ended up being a professor for a very long time at Baldwin-Wallace in Ohio. You used those teaching skills virtually all over the world. You've taught in Costa Rica. You worked with the American University in Thailand. When the war ended, you found yourself spending a great deal of time in Cambodia, in Vietnam. You've been in the Philippines. And what year was it that Vietnam contacted you for an extraordinary honor? Oh,
in 2015, I was invited back to Vietnam, and they gave me the key to Ho Chi Minh City, the old Saigon. And Saigon, as pictured in the here, as we were chained to the U.S. Embassy gate in 1971 to protest the war. And of course, we were arrested and sent out of the country.
But what an honor that all those years later, Vietnam knew that you had worked for peace in their country, and they called you from the United States there to say thank you for your efforts on behalf of this country for peace. You know, you refer to this picture, and the book essentially starts with this because it's pretty dramatic. Billy and I were just married. It was 1970. My husband, Bill Carlson, you married us, and pretty soon off you are. You're going, and you're going to do something dramatic. Well, you did. You and fellow priests chained yourself to the gates of the American Embassy in Vietnam and were promptly arrested. And it looked like you might not get out, and you were frightened, yes?
If I were frightened, I wasn't aware of it. At that time in my life, I was not mature enough emotionally to be aware of my feelings. And unfortunately, and it was really took graduate school when I was 40 years of age to grow up, to become mature emotionally and become really aware and be able to cry and not see it as childish.
My goodness, Harry. That's extraordinary, isn't it? Kind of gives all of us hope. But you were arrested, obviously. You ended up being released. But even that one story is extraordinary. You did a sit down in the Pentagon, and you were arrested in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon because isn't everybody?
Well,
it never stopped. We used to get these calls, and it scared the devil out of us. I'm arrested here.
Yeah, the Quakers had been reading the names of all the American soldiers who had been killed in Vietnam, and they came to the end, 58,000.
Yeah.
And they asked the Catholics to do some kind of ceremony. And so the Catholic Peace Fellowship in New York asked me to come and say Mass in the Pentagon. And we were told the night before that if we tried to do that, we would be arrested, so we shouldn't do it. But we went ahead. And
what a surprise. Apparently you didn't learn anything from the Vatican. You're a slow learner, huh?
Well, anyway, it was the cleanest jail I was ever in Alexandria, Virginia.
Well, that certainly is impressive, Harry. Good for you. Let's fast forward to another time. You have been very concerned about the Palestinian difficulties for a long time. And the Michigan Peace Group, with whom you are affiliated, was putting together a peacekeeping effort as the Jews were being moved off the Gaza Strip. And there was concern that as they were moving off, there would be a confrontation between the Jewish population and the Palestinian population. And this small band of priests and nuns decided to go over there, get an apartment there, and as the Jews were moving off the Gaza Strip, you were going to physically place yourself in between the Jews and the Palestinians so that no harm would come to anyone. I am your contact for that trip.
Yes.
And about 3 o'clock one morning, I got a call from, let's say, Mary at Michigan Peace. And Nancy, we have something to tell you before it makes the news. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. We have gotten word that Father Harold Burry has been kidnapped at gunpoint in Gaza. We don't have any other information, but that's what we know so far. I literally went down to the floor. And then all of us were terrified for a period of time. Tell us what was happening to you and how it happened.
Well, that was 2005, and the Patriarch of Jerusalem invited priests and nuns to come and be human shields between the Jewish settlers and the Palestinians, because the research showed that if internationalists came between warring groups, that they tended not to shoot at each other. And the reason that priests and nuns were invited is that the Israel would allow us to come into the country believing that we were coming there to do spiritual things. They didn't think that we would be
an activist as you became.
Yes.
But it's at breakfast one morning. You are all having breakfast, the priests, and someone knocks on the door, and being you, you're the first one up and you go to the door. What happened?
Well, actually, it was so blooming hot that the door was open.
Okay.
And here was this huge fella standing there with a little guy next to him. Little guy had a rifle, and the big fella had a pistol at his side. And when I saw them, I invited him in to share the little pita breakfast that we had just finished, because there was still some there. And he walked in and he said, "Could I speak to you for a moment?" So I got up and said, "Sure." And as I walked towards him, he put his arm around me, said, "Come on out into the hall. I want to talk to you about something." So sure, I went out, and when I stepped outside, there was another person on either side of the door, and quickly they threw a mask over my head.
A black hood.
The hood, yes, and rushed me down the stairs, and I was most concerned about not stumbling and breaking an ankle or something. And they said, as they did this, do what we tell you or we'll kill you. So they pushed me into the car, and I sat between him and this other little guy, and the other two drove off. They drove around for about 15, 20 minutes, and then we got to a place, very small room with a bed, a window. I could hear children in the distance playing on a playground, and I sat there on the bed for a bit, and then a person came in and said that they wanted to tape me, to videotape me, and they wanted me to answer 4 questions. 1, my name, my occupation, and that I worked for the CIA and for the Israeli army. And I said, well, I don't work for the CIA or the Israeli army. And they said, say it anyway or we'll shoot you. So then they took the hood off to do the video, and I tried to say it in such a way that anybody watching could see that this was not something I was being truthful. But to this day, I feel bad. I feel guilty that I didn't tell the truth. I lied.
Harry, you can't mean that. Why on earth it wouldn't have made any difference that you said that under coercion? What makes a difference is that they didn't kill you.
Well, I understand, but I still feel bad that I lied. But I said it anyway, and then they left. Apparently they were happy enough with what they had. And then the guard said I could take my hood off. And so we began to talk. And I said, are you the police? And he said, no. And I said, are you Israelis? No. And I said, well, who are you? And they said, well, he said, I've been shot 4 times. We don't have enough medicine here. We don't have school books for the kids. And he began to complain about not only the Israelis who keep Gaza really in a prison, so to speak, but the other Palestinians who on the West Bank who are not, they believe, giving them enough food and medicine and other financial help. And so it was a struggle among the Palestinians. And they grabbed me to show the Abbas on the West Bank that they were tough enough, strong enough, and brave enough to grab an internationalist in broad daylight and hold me. And so after a couple hours, they finally said to me, put the hood back on and said, we're moving you. And I took that's normal. I understood that when they capture people, they move them around different places so they don't get caught. And then they got me out on the street, and he said into my ear, go home, and he ran off. So then I slowly took 2 hoods off, and I could hear the children, so I walked to the playground, and there I found somebody that would speak English and call the police.
And it was at that point that you got back to the place that you had been staying, and it was suggested you should get out of the country immediately. Billy and I got a call, and you ended up with a cell phone, and you were in the back of a cab trying to get out of Palestine and
out of Gaza.
Out of Gaza. And I remember your saying, I don't know if I'm going to make it because the Israelis control the gates.
The checkpoints,
The
yes.
checkpoints, and they're slowing it down, and they may close the checkpoint before I get up to it, and I might not get out. And we were terrified. But in fact, finally, talking on the phone from the backseat of that cab, you got out and
well, you
came
guys
home.
contacted my congressman.
Yes, we did right away.
Kucinich.
Yes.
And Kucinich obviously worked.
Yes.
But we got out.
Yes, you did.
The Lord was with us, you know. I really trust in God, and I think that's what enables all of us to have the courage to do these things. I remember Leonard Hirsch, the other fellow here, a wonderful Jewish person.
Leonard is the one on the front of the book who
Yeah.
is in civilian clothing, not in the priestly.
Catholics, yeah.
Yes.
And he was a Jewish fellow in graduate school with me, and he came to also participate in it. And as we were going off to chain ourselves, he says, "It's easy for you guys. You believe in another life." He's a skeptic, and he didn't believe in it. There was life after death. So it was much more scary for him. But our faith makes it possible, I think, to have the courage to stand up against what we believe is immoral.
I'm flip-flopping around a lot, but you're already getting what a life this has been, and it's in this book, and you need to read it. And if they can't find it anyplace else, it's on Amazon.com. 71, maybe, you became part of a group that went to North Vietnam to help with the release of 3 American POWs. That in itself was extraordinary, but of course, part of the equation was how on earth can this trip be paid for? And a good friend of ours, who was an up-and-comer and people were just starting to learn about him, had written a song for our wedding, Follow Me, and sang it for us at our wedding that you officiated at, John Denver. And when you said, I got to go back to Vietnam and these pilots are going to be released and we're going to be there, I don't have the money. We had John and Annie come over to the little apartment we had, and you did, and you explained to them what you were doing and that you needed some money. And John said, Nancy, if you can get the Guthrie Theater, I'll do a concert for free, but I want to be sure that everybody can come, so I don't want tickets to be more than $3. Well, he filled up the old Guthrie Theater, and it gave you the money to go to Vietnam and help.
$10,000.
And that was a lot in 1971. And you were part of a group that was there at the release of 3 American POWs.
And brought the pilots out.
Yeah, that was something, wasn't it?
Indeed.
There are so many somethings in your life. I want them to also know about the first book that you wrote. This is called An Invitation to Think and Feel Differently in the New Millennium. In this book, now Maverick Priest, you tell us about you and all of your beliefs and struggles and stories. This is a philosophy, a theory you present to us about life and how we might choose to live it. And you propose there are 4 precepts. Tell us what they are.
4 assumptions.
Assumptions, that's it, thank you.
That if a critical mass of people would believe and act according to these assumptions, I believe that we would have peace in the world. And the first one is that we're always in the process of becoming, in the sense of learning. We never arrive, so nobody knows the truth absolutely. When people believe that they know the truth, then they become a closed system and they don't listen anymore to anybody who disagrees with them because they already know. And so they don't have to study either. So, and if it's salient enough, they're willing to kill other people that don't agree with them. The second assumption is that there's good and bad in everything, and what we are doing now in our present situation, our present paradigm, is to focus on what's wrong, and we call them problems. And so we try and fix them all the time. And I'm suggesting that we don't do that. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, focus on what is working and enhance it and make it better. And the third assumption is that we're all one. Now, if we assume that, then we stop competing with each other and we begin to cooperate with each other. And when what's good for you needs to be good for me and vice versa, or isn't any good. And the final one, which is probably the most controversial, is just as I don't say that there is no such thing as truth in the first assumption, but that we never come to know it absolutely, completely. So here I'm not saying that we don't have free will, simply saying that we rarely, if ever, use it. Rather, we always do what seems best, and we're not free to do anything else. So that means there's no bad intention people. Nobody sets out to hurt other people.
I think one of the ways you've said it to me is that it is your assumption that we all do moment to moment through our life what we believe to be in our best interest.
Yes.
And you suggest that we are essentially incapable of acting in any other manner, even when from the outside it looks like this person is crazy, abusive, anything. You suggest that within them, for whatever reason this behavior exists, they believe, we believe, I believe, it is in their self-interest.
They believe that what they're doing is good.
And that, when you use the word controversial, when we've had talks and discussions, and we have for years, some of them very heated. I remember one night, a friend was over, and you and I get into it, right? And all of a sudden you're shouting and I'm shouting, and this poor guy is saying, I never saw anybody holler at a priest before. Even poor Ron. But we have had these conversations, and this controversial element, people immediately pull out Hitler. What do you mean Hitler wasn't bad? And you actually will say he acted in a manner that he believed was in his own best interest, and therefore his actions were bad, but he was not bad. You continue to say to us all the time, there are no evil people capable of evil actions, but no evil people. And you've taken a battering for that over the years, sometimes from me late at night, yes?
Yeah, any good parent makes the distinction between the child and the child's behavior. They may hate the behavior, they never stop loving their child. And that's what God does. God never stops loving us. There's nothing that we can do that would ever cause God to stop loving us.
I want to fast forward again. We've been like a ping pong ball, but there's so much. You just need the 2 books, okay? Think and Live Differently, Maverick Priest. It'll help, trust me. In 2018, actually you began in 2017, and a lot of people, myself included, thought, oh golly, there's Harry with this intense belief about peace and involving people, and he's going to go out there with a battering ram once again. And you made something extraordinary happen. You have given life to something that is going to continue. Tell us about the Twin Cities Nonviolence.
Well, Twin Cities Nonviolent is an organization that is working to create an environment in which the Twin Cities can be free from violence. And we started with a 10 days free from violence last fall, beginning with the September 21st, the International Peace Day. And during the summer, during those 10 days, we had about 70 organizations that put on various kinds of programs, lectures, some peace concerts, some training in nonviolence, and so on. During the summer, I went to visit the brothers in the 4th Precinct. They call themselves brothers, other people call them gang members. And there were 11 of them that I spoke with, and I listened to them mostly. But at the end of our meeting, I asked them to do me a favor. I asked them to protect their area and not allow any violence during these 10 days that were coming up. I said that I grew up on the north side of Minneapolis, and I remember as a boy, 14, 15, hitchhiking to Camden to go swimming, and even up to Brainerd, and Mother didn't worry, Dad didn't worry. And then when I was old enough to drive, I would pick up hitchhikers, and nothing ever happened to them or me. So I explained to them that I really knew the area. I knew the parks, Fowell Park and North Commons, and I said, the parents there want to be able to have their children walk to the park and go to school and not worry about getting a bullet. So would you help me? And the brother said, we'll think about it. So a week before the 10 days, I called my contact and I said, what do they decide to do? And he said, well, each brother is going to make sure that there's no violence in the block he lives in. And then on the first day of the 10 days, they're going to have a block party, and they're going to cook hamburgers for the neighborhood. And during that 10 days, they're going to be teaching the little children nonviolence. Well, I was blown away.
Mm-hmm.
So after the 10 days, my contact came to our press conference, and he told that story. When he finished, one of the persons from the press said, how do you know you were successful? And without blinking an eye, my contact said, no funerals.
Oh. Oh.
No funerals. We had 10 days, no funerals. We're going to do it again this fall. It looks like there'll be even more collaborators. And in between times, we're working with city officials, with the police. We're moving to make sure that from now on, there's going to be less and less violence in the Twin Cities. And one of the biggest obstacles to that is the belief, the assumption by most people that the way to prevent wrongdoing, the way to prevent violence is by violence, by punishment. So our biggest challenge is to help people to see that that doesn't work. You know, in our prisons in the United States and throughout the world, 85% of the people who go to prison come back because punishment doesn't work. We need to change the way we think about how you deal with people who break the law. As we said before, they think they're acting in their own self-interest. So we got to help them see it's not in their self-interest to break the law. And we do it not by punishment, but by positive reinforcement, and from a religious point of view, by love.
You know, as you're talking about that, I'm reminded we all wore, didn't we, our buttons and our medallions during the fight against the Vietnam War. And I remember so vividly one of the buttons said, why do we send people to kill people to show people that killing people is wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You are 89 years old. You say Mass, even though retired at various places when a priest has to take a vacation or needs a day off, several times a week. You drive around in a car that is pretty much a giant bumper sticker. I mean, how many bumper stickers do you have on your car? I mean, 20, 30?
I would like 20, yes.
Yeah, at least. And whatever social justice movement you want to talk about, it's there on your car. As you look back, I already kind of know the answer to this, and you know it bothers me a lot, because we have this conversation regularly where you say, I feel I have failed. I feel I have been ineffective. I think you had hoped that when you started this peace movement back in the 60s, that everybody would say, oh my goodness, Father Burry, those are amazing words of wisdom. We're going to do exactly the kind of things you suggest, and by now the world would be different. And when you say you think you have failed, those of us who have been enriched by you and know we are different, and we know we view the world differently because of you, become very concerned that you would even believe that. So as you look back on all of these years, and as you look forward, because clearly you have no intention of stopping, if dreams came true, what would it look like?
Well, I'm in a different place now. You might call it conversion. But it's Mother Teresa who really set me straight. And she said that it doesn't matter whether we're successful or not. What matters is that we're faithful, And so it's okay I don't have to be successful. We don't. We trust in the Lord, and we attempt to be faithful.
Will you do something for me? Will you try very hard to believe you've been successful?
Okay.
Deal?
Deal.
I knew your mother and father. I've met your brother. I know your sister. Your mother and father were dear, sweet, extraordinary people. Not only are you a priest, your sister is a Carmelite nun. And she's been in the Carmel since she was a teenager. And she was the homecoming queen at De La Salle High School, and yet she went into the Carmel. Sister Carmela Ann has been such an important figure in your life, even though most of your life you never ever have lived together. And being in the Carmel, she doesn't even have the ability to come and go and see you. Tell me about the influence of someone who has dedicated their life as she has.
Well, she has had a profound influence on me because I've always was assured of her prayers. So I received a certain amount of courage, a certain amount of maybe naivete in some sense, but determination to seek peace, knowing that she was praying hard for me and for all of us. So I think her being there, having my back, so to speak, as the young people say today, made a huge difference on me being able to act for peace.
The dedication in your Maverick priest is written in honor of my deceased parents, Leona Cummers and Harold Burry. My sister Louise, a Carmelite nun who continues to inspire me, and my brother Frederick, from whom I never cease to learn. And to all peace activists, especially from 1965 through to the present, who I know have my back. What haven't we talked about that you want to tell us?
Well, I'd like the people to not lose hope, to have courage, to take risks, not be afraid. We're making a difference. Maybe we won't achieve everything that we set out to do, but we're making a difference. And we need to persist. We need to persevere. We need to move on.
We often have conversations about compassion. I think you and I are in agreement that that is perhaps the most human value that we can possess. And yet we see an extraordinary lack of it day to day in our society. What can we do about that, Harry?
Well, I can't do much about it, but when the Holy Father was here and spoke at the Congress, he mentioned the Golden Rule.
Do unto others as you
And the people in the Congress stood up, and clapped.
do unto others as you will have them do unto you. This rule
And what that
points
is empathy. It's the ability to put yourself in the place of another person and experience what they're experiencing. So if a person is joyful, you can be joyful with them. And if a person is hurting, you can hurt with them. You can suffer with them, and that's what compassion is. It's from the Latin cum means with, and passio means suffering, to suffer with. And that's what's lacking in our country is we're, and all over the world, not just the U.S., but what is lacking is we are not able, or we haven't seen the significance, the importance of being able to, or at least striving to put yourself in the place of the other person and see the world out of the eyes of that person. And that's why, for example, you mentioned Hitler. If you could put yourself in Hitler's place and realize that he was a victim. His father used to beat him 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. He was a victim like most of the people who are in prison today. If you look at their backgrounds, you'll find that most of them were people who were treated very badly and were unloved. And so then they behaved in a way that was incapable for them to truly love, because they didn't learn how to do that. So if we can put ourselves in the place of the other person, it'll make all the difference in the world.
Many people wrote notes recommending your book and about your book. Arun Gandhi, the founder, president, yes, that word Gandhi, the founder, president of Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute in Rochester, New York, wrote, "Maverick Priest is the story of a remarkable man of God who in a very real sense devoted his life to living the life of a true Christian, a remarkable book of self-sacrifice." I'm guessing that you would never describe yourself as having sacrificed anything, would you?
No, I don't, no. In fact, I don't even like to use the word. I don't see me or anybody else sacrificing. I see us giving of ourselves, but it's not a sacrifice. It's a opportunity. It's a blessing to be able to give. And Arun Gandhi is the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi.
Just think, and he wrote on your book. Okay, here's the commercial. Twin Cities Nonviolent comes up in September of 2019. There is a website you can go to today, and it is twincitiesnonviolent.com.
.org.
.org. twincitiesnonviolent.org. You can see what they're doing now. You can volunteer. You can certainly become involved in all of the events that will take place in September. An invitation to think and feel differently in the new millennium. Maverick Priest, A Story of Life on the Edge. Both by Father Harold J. Burry, Ph.D., or as I like to call him, Dr. Father.
Thank you, Nancy, for being so kind and asking such great questions and being my friend.
You don't get to say it very often. We do it privately. But I have known a lot of people in my lifetime. I have known you for most of my life. And every minute of it has been a privilege, Dr. Father.
Oh,
A privilege.
God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you, as always, every time you stop into Democratic Visions. Thanks to Jeff Strait, who met you, Harry, at an event, called me and said, "Gotta have this guy on the show." Keep the faith, friends. Keep involved. Keep watching Democratic Visions. And get Father Harry J. Burry's books. I'm Nancy Nelson. It has been such an honor to be here today with this gentleman and with you. Thank you for your time.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Edina, Minnetonka, and Bloomington. Watch us on select cable systems and on our YouTube channel. This is Carol Sundstrom.